Ladies and gentlemen, uh, we still have people coming in, but even if we keep Indian Standard Time, I think it's time to start off. I'd like to welcome all of you who've come in here on a cold December evening on a Sunday at the very height of the holiday season. Before we start, I'd like to say that a couple of our speakers have unfortunately, because of, I think, the weather and illness, dropped out. However, we do have a very, very strong panel of speakers here. We are here essentially to celebrate the birth anniversary of K.P.S. Gill, and I think without any exaggeration we can say that is the man who saved Punjab and possibly the unity and integrity of the entire country. We can also take a moment, I think, here to remember Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who has passed away just a couple of days ago. We've decided to go ahead with this program despite that, because I think this is also a commemorative event. In passing, I'd like to mention that when Mr. Gill passed away, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had visited the house to condole the family. Before he came, his aides had said that, look, he's going to come, but he doesn't take his shoes off. So he said, that's not a problem. And none of us were taking our shoes off in the presence of the body. But he came, and that's the kind of man he was. He insisted on taking his shoes off before he went into the presence of the body. And as he left, he turned to me, and I am nobody. He did not know me from Adam, but I had received him. I was leaving him at his car. And he turned to me and he said, K.P.S. Gill was one of the bravest men I knew. And he restored Sikh pride. And that's something I would like to remember him for. One of the officers who served under him, and he is not present here today, I will not name him, but he said that a general like K.P.S. Gill is born once in centuries. And this we should understand, that throughout the insurgency in Punjab, he led from the front, which is something that is rare. I shall perhaps return to this when I conclude the evening today. There are a lot of IPS officers nowadays who say that we are higher police management. He's the kind of man who would laugh at them. He said, anyone can sit in the headquarters and sign files. You've got to get the job done. And he got the job done by the most extraordinary means. This was a man who spent decades, literally, more than a decade, with spending more than 25 to 26 days every month traveling in a car into the areas of the gravest danger. Others will speak of this. And by his own courage, he catalyzed courage in the others. He transformed a broken police force into one of the finest and strongest forces in the country. They went into the countryside, into the heartland of the terrorists, and they eventually defeated terrorism, perhaps the most comprehensive defeat of terrorism in the world, a terrorism of this scale. And yet, we find that not only K.P.S. Gill, but perhaps the entire police force that fought alongside him, the central forces that fought besides him, and the army and elements of the army that fought besides him, are today virtually forgotten in terms of their contribution. I remember something that Mr. Gill wrote once, quoting the Granth Sahib. He spoke of akirt ghan, forgetfulness or ingratitude. And he also wrote that no people who treat their heroes as we have done can be expected to survive. He wasn't talking about himself. He was talking about the others who had sacrificed their lives, who had fought in Punjab against tremendous odds. And I think today there is this, even as our troubles begin again in Punjab, there is a tendency every time there are 2 or 3 killings to say, oh, we are back in the 1980s and we are back in the 1990s. We have forgotten, or perhaps most of us, the younger people, do not even know the sheer scale of what was achieved there. And I do hope, in remembering him today and remembering what he did, some of the speakers will remind us of the sheer magnitude of what Punjab suffered and the sheer magnitude of what K.P.S. Gill and the Punjab police achieved. I would request these speakers to all come up on the stage. Mr. N. Vora, Mr. Suresh Arora, Professor Bharat Karnad, and absolutely last, Mr. Shekhar Gupta. Please. We would have Mr. Vora speaking first. He does not really require an introduction in the India International Center, but there are some of you who may not be so familiar with him. He's the former Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister. He's been Home Secretary. He's been Union Defense Secretary. He served as the Governor of Jammu and Kashmir for 2 terms. And he served very crucially as the Home Secretary in Punjab during the critical phases of terrorism. He is Padma Vibhushan, and I would invite Mr. Vora. I would also like to inform you that Mr. Vora is here despite an illness, and he is here essentially on the strength of antibiotics and his own willpower. Mr. Vora, please.
Well, as Dr. Ajasani has just said, all of us are assembled here this evening. And besides whatever each one of us may have to say, basically, all of us would be agreed that it is to celebrate K.P.S.'s 90th birthday. It's the anniversary. Now, I may be prejudiced in whatever I say because K.P.S. and I were same college. He was a year senior to me, and he took the exam a year before me. And when the result came, I happened to be somewhere where he was. And he came running out of the room and said that, result come out? I said, yes. I had the Tribune with me. And I had not seen the result inside because I didn't know it had come out. I just got the paper. So he immediately opened the page where the results were. He said, don't waste time, start looking at my name from the bottom. Don't look at it from the top. His sense of humor was, he perhaps wanted to be only in the police, and sure enough, his name was there. And then he got the Assam cadre, and a year later I got into service, I got the Punjab cadre. So we lost track. Now, his name, as Dr. Sani mentions, is a well-known name. Now, one school of thought which cannot be diluted or eroded postulates and reiterates that it was his contribution alone, standing there on the deck, that led to the termination of terrorism in Punjab, restoration of at least that kind of normalcy which could lead to elections, and Sardar Bhayan Singh was elected to lead the state. Then there is another school of thought, which fortunately is not too much in the news in recent times, but which I mentioned because while he was in Punjab, I moved from defense to home, and I had to deal with hundreds of parliament questions and more than hundreds of issues raised in the UN Human Rights Commission in Geneva and in the UN at New York about human rights violations, and somewhere or the other Gill's name would come in. But I'll come to that later. Now we are talking of K.P.S. and the age and the man. Now, it's very easy to straight away get on to 83, 84 and say, this is what happened, this is what didn't happen. But I would say that it is profitable to quickly look back 47, even before 47. The old Punjab, undivided Punjab, was perhaps one of the strongest states in the country, provinces, no state that time. And then with whatever happened, partition came, and we got this part of Punjab, the east part of Punjab. East Punjab was particularly underdeveloped. You had the hills of which are present Himachal Pradesh, right up to Laul Spiti. The old Punjab spread from Khyber to Agra, and now we were left on this side of the rivers. And when partition took place, we had millions of refugees, not all belonging to Punjab, who were coming to East Punjab, but all those who were living in that part of India which became West Pakistan, they were all on their way via Amritsar or via Firozpur. And lakhs of them were killed, slaughtered, butchered, and lakhs were homeless. I belonged to the latter category. We came in September 47, virtually barefooted, because family thought that this is just a passing phase. Hindus killing Muslims killing Hindus. This will blow over and so on, but didn't happen. So that was the situation then. Why I mention this is that there were colossal challenges in Punjab of rehabilitation, of lakhs and lakhs of people to be looked after, food, shelter, clothing, medical care, and so on. Any number of refugee centers were set up. There was no food, there was almost a famine-like situation, so ration shops were set up. I remember the old days when one could stand in a line for 8 hours, and by the time your turn came, they said the ration is finished. So you started all over again next day. So those were very difficult days, and fortunately none of you here are old enough or that old to have gone through that kind of situation, which I cannot forget. Then from there on, post-47, after all these challenges were very, very effectively met, normalcy was restored, law and order were restored. By and large, things got on their feet. All that happened how? It was the Punjab civilian, the Punjab police, and the Punjab politician. And in this phase, which I would say the first 20 years or so, 47 to 67, 66, the Punjab got reorganized, divided, and early 67, the Congress rule ended in Punjab and the coalition phase started. So it's a good period to look at, these 20 years. Now in these 20 years, one man called Cairo, he was CM for 8 years, but he had been development minister, revenue minister earlier. He laid very strong foundations for good agriculture, for good education, dams, power, transport, education, agriculture universities, engineering universities. You mentioned it, and he did it. He laid the foundations of Punjab in the manner that Jawaharlal Nehru laid the foundations of India. But then you know how he had to go and how he was killed on the roadside. I mention this because, in brief, I would say that these 20 years had many ups and downs, many aberrations, but this was a period of nation building as far as Punjab is concerned, and foundation being laid. And among the many other achievements one can look back and mention was the Green Revolution, which saved the entire country from having to beg for food. And the foundations of Green Revolution were laid by no less than Pratap Singh Kayo. Land holdings, settlement of land holdings, consolidation of land holdings, protection of the security of tenure of the tiller, protection of the tiller agricultures, and better farming, mechanization, better seeds, better fertilizers, and so on and so forth. And it led ultimately to India being proud enough as a country of our size with our level of population to be exporting food grains. Now, I quickly come to the end of this phase, and let's say from this phase passes in early 67, coalition phase starts, let's say 67 to 92, 25 years. This is the beginning of, if I may say so, looking back, a soft government. In these 25 years, the Congress ruled for 9 years, the Akali Dal ruled for 9 years, the governor ruled for 7 years. Look at the proportion. In the 9 years of Congress rule, there were 2 chief ministers. In the Akali Dal 9 years, there were 6 chief ministers and 7 years of governor's rule. Now, why did all this happen, the instability? Because of soft governance, inadequate, ineffective. And in 78, on Baisakhi Day, when there was a clash with the Damdami Taksal and the Nirankari mission, that was the beginning of terrorism in Punjab, beginning of our problems. But the government of the day did not take effective steps to nip it in the bud, and it spawned more problems, leading to terrorism getting a firm foothold in Punjab. Radicalism, extremism, and any number of small Akali or Khalistani terrorist groups demanding Khalistan, they were spawned, they started becoming stronger, more vociferous in their voice, and more violent in their actions. And at about this time, I would say that Punjab was very unlucky in more ways than one, because with all that's happening within Punjab, the center was not looking very kindly at us. The center-state relations were very defective. They were fractured, and the center-state politics was also very questionable. Certain elements in Punjab were being assisted, even with weaponry, on the premise that a certain group will become strong enough and deal with the Akalis. But that was a belief in certain quarters of the Congress. So erosion of Darbara Singh's authority, weakening his government, and so on, this all contributed to ineffectiveness, lack of direction, and the bureaucracy and the police services not knowing which direction exactly they should be traveling. And as the situation declined by the day, we saw the emergence of Minnawale, who was earlier well known in Mehta Chowk, but then with his clout was growing by the day, he had shifted his headquarters to the Golden Temple, and we can't afford to forget how this young D.I.G. Atwal, when he had gone there, he was shot on the doorstep of the Golden Temple, and not a dog moved there after that. There was no police riposte, no response, no counter attack. They just swallowed his murder. 15 feet away on the road in front of the gate of the temple, any number of shops, people standing there eating. And there were a number of constables. Nobody came to pick up his dead body. He was a brilliant police officer. He was my immediate neighbor, very young person. Then this went on, and we're talking of the age. That's why I'm telling you all this. The stage came when things went beyond any kind of control, and the Union government started to hand it over to the army. Operation Blue Star, General Sundarji, General Dayal, General Brar. Whatever happened, I don't need to go into it. But the operation itself did not leave aside dealing with Bhimdrawale and getting his body out of the Akal Takht and so on. At midnight, we tried to get his brother from Jalandhar, who was in the army, to come and identify. But the complete destruction of the social fabric of Punjab, the Hindu-Sikh closeness from day one, from the day Khalsa was born, you couldn't mention Sikhs or Hindus as separate entities. In my father's village, for instance, in district Amritsar, near Atari, Sham Singh Wala, the firstborn, if he was a son, was a Singh. And the ceremonies were held in, the family had to go to Golden Temple and so on, and pay obeisance. And from that time to Blue Star, when, as it happened, my duty to carry out certain responsibilities, as I was entering the temple, some very well-built Sardarjis stopped me and assaulted me almost and saying, "Oh, Babuji, kithe jande ho?" Then I lost my temper. I said to them various things which I've never said in my life. I said, eventually caught hold of one of them by the beard, and I said, "Come on, I show you the number of stones laid here by my father's brothers, uncles, father, grandfather's brothers. Returned from the Boer War, returned from the Afghan War, serving Ranjit Singh's army. Whenever they went to war, when they came back, as Thanksgiving, they used to lay ₹1 da patthar, ₹5 da patthar, marble, and Persian, Urdu, Punjabi. Good. So I showed most of the temple had suffered large damage after the Blue Star. There were nearly 3 lakh pockmarks by the shelling. And it took us. I was Financial Commissioner, Public Works when this happened. And I was sent for by the governor. He said, "Take my aeroplane and leave immediately." Prime Minister has given us 90 days to restore the temple to its pristine glory, which was easier said than done. But anyway, the next 30, 40 days I spent, we didn't go anywhere, architects, engineers, electricians. We slept in the temple, ate in the temple, working day and night. But that apart, that is aside. So I would say that the situation not having been nipped well in time led to this Blue Star, and Blue Star led to the almost a permanent divide amongst the communities of Punjab. And an air of uncertainty and distrust which invariably follows such decisions. Now, with this kind of situation, as it always happened in government, whether mostly in the state, but many times at the center, post-Blue Star, when the consequences started suffering, then they found nothing better to do than to sacked the governor, sacked the chief secretary, sacked the DG, sacked the home secretary. And in this removal program, I got a call at past midnight to go and take over as home secretary. Not a clue why all this is happening. The then home secretary was one of my younger colleagues and a very fine officer. Anyway, I took over, and it didn't take me very long, not more than a day, 24 hours, to realize that the task that the governor wanted us to carry out, to restore normalcy, was virtually impossible. School teachers were being killed in front of their students. Civilians, judges, magistrates were killed in their courts. Young police officers going for a jog in the morning or on duty somewhere, killed daylight. Cinema halls, railway stations burned. So it was total mayhem. We're talking of the age. It was a very difficult age, very disturbed time. And I found on an internal reckoning within the police department that there were not very many takers who would willing to be posted in Amritsar, Gurdaspur, Firozpur, or even in the hinterland of Jalandhar and Ludhiana. And one badly needed Sikh officers to lead the force, turbaned officers. So they were not there, and those who were there were not willing. Somebody had some medical problem, somebody had to go somewhere else. Then I asked the government of India whether I could borrow Sikh officers from other states. He said yes. I said the procedure will take 100 days. I write, and then you write to the chief secretary of that state and so on. He says, whom do you have in mind? I said, I have made inquiries. One young officer in Pune, SS Virk. I have never met him, but I knew his father in Punjab. He was a Punjab civilian. And K.P.S. Gill, my college mate. So he says, where is K.P.S. Gill? I said, I have not found out, but I'll find out. I'm asking your permission. He realized that this business of doing things on files was not possible. He said, go ahead, ring him up and tell him. I said, this didn't happen like that. But anyway, I found Gill was in Jammu at that time, Inspector General of one of the Central Armed Police Forces. Virk was Assistant Commissioner of Police in Pune. I was able to get both of them within about 6 days. Now, Gill came at that time, I think in the then DG's mind there was a little fear. Gill, already known in Assam, he was 20 years in Assam, known for his unorthodox style and his fearless approach to life. He thought that if I bring Gill at headquarters, maybe my own job may be in jeopardy, So I posted Gill as IGPAP in Jalandhar, which was good enough for me because all the action in the districts was done by the armed police, and we needed somebody to lead that force. So he did a wonderful job in converting, going from place to place, speaking to the Jawans, the JCOs, officers, and leading them personally, to. Now, I won't go into details, anecdotes of how things happened where and how fields were burnt, how houses were burnt, and how properties were burnt, how people were killed. But the main thing is, after Indira Gandhi was assassinated and Sant Longowal was killed in August, the government changed the governor again. And Satarawala Saab was replaced by Mr. Arjun Singh, formerly Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh. So as soon as he came, I thought I am also on the way out, and Gill also would be on the way out. But he sent for me and said that, look, I have no time to go into too many discussions. I am telling you that I want to hold elections in the state as early as possible. Okay. So I didn't say anything because the situation on the ground didn't seem to lend itself to political campaigning and rallies and so on. Anyway, we worked day and night, and the Gill was at it from morning till late night. We succeeded in holding elections on September 29th, we concluded the elections. There was 67% participation, despite all the rioting and the arson and the killings. And Chief Election Commissioner was very happy. He sent congratulatory letters to the governor and so on. But side by side, as it happens always, the terrorists had not been sitting idle. They issued a threat letter, which both the RAW and the IB gave to the central authorities. General Vaidya, General Sundarji, General Dayal, General Brar, myself and a few others were to be eliminated on the soonest possible basis. General Sundarji had soon after Blue Star left for Delhi as Vice Chief. General Dayal was moved out to do a job in Delhi. General Brar was also shifted out immediately. And I had stayed on to do what I had been asked to do, and so also Mr. Gill. So when I went to call on the governor on the day elections were completed, then I wanted to ask him for two favors, which I had never asked. One was to give me a little leave, because I had not had a day's leave for 15 months. And second was to send my name to Delhi, because I thought that I would not be able to serve. I had issued about 8,000 to 9,000 detention orders under the Public Security Act. And the people I detained, amongst them was the new cabinet. So I could well understand that they would compel the chief minister to sack me or to jail me. So after meeting the governor said, yes, you don't have to give me anything in writing. I've already spoken to Delhi. You'll get your orders by tomorrow, because there is a certain element of threat. He didn't mention the details. I got to know later. Then I went to see the CM designate, whom I knew very well earlier, Mr. Barnala. And he was in the Sangrur jail. And he asked for some leave, and I had been able to get it for him. He had some family problems. So he was very, very civilized and very polite. So I said that I would be needing your support to now go on leave and leave the state. He said, no. भाई साहब तुसी की गल कर दो मैं तो चीफ सेक्रेटरी लाना तुसी फालतू गल्लां ना करो मेरे नाल I said, sir, with due respect, tomorrow is your first cabinet meeting. You indirectly mention my name and you will realize what you are saying is not possible. So even before he could mention my name and he entered the room, I was not there, chief secretary was there. The first demand of the cabinet was to arrest me and to jail me. For good reason, fair enough. So he sent for me in the evening. He sent his own car. I had surrendered my staff car because I had given up the job. So I went to his home and he apologized, very polite. I said, no, sir, I understand. So that was that. Now I think I've strayed far too much. Let me come to Mr. Gill. I left for the reason that I was in the threat list, and 5, 10, 15 days later, Mr. Gill was sent back to Delhi. He got a job. It seemed, in other words, that the tasks were over, everything is now fine. Mr. Barnala will run a good civilian government and all will be hunky-dory. Well, that didn't happen, and I went to defense. I served there for over 7 years, and then at the fag end of my career, I was transferred to home. Both in defense and home, I had occasion to, not occasion, in fact, part of my responsibility to be dealing with Punjab issues. So I know what was happening, and I knew exactly what Gill was doing and the problems that he was facing and the problem that he was also creating for us in Delhi. Now, with that kind of situation, one thought that either the government of the day in Delhi, when he had finished his work, he was to retire in the normal course at the end of 92, that they will honor him and they will send him out as a governor or some place. So I suggested to the Home Minister, Mr. Gill is coming to see me tomorrow. Will you have time to see him? He said, yes. I said, may I suggest something when he sees you? if you consider it okay. I said, please appoint him as the security advisor for the entire Northeast. He comes from Samkada, and his headquarters would be in Delhi, and he could tour to the Northeast as and when he likes, and keep an eye and give him minister's rank, Minister of State rank. So Home Minister said it's a very good idea because that's one way of honoring him. When I told K.P.S. small conversation, he didn't say anything, but he did go to meet the minister, and whatever he told the minister, I never got to know. But the net result was that I was retiring in about 20-25 days from that day when I had this conversation, and I duly retired, and Mr. Gill continued in Punjab. He got several extensions. Now the question I will say in conclusion, not taking too much time, is what would be the basis of decrying the work done by Mr. Gill, if anybody still wants to do that. And I would say, as I had asked this question from my superiors when I was in Home and Gill was commanding in Punjab, I said, if you find his style, his approach unacceptable or unlawful or illegal or improper, remove him just now. He's on extension. They had no answer. I said, what is exactly our approach in Punjab? No answer. I said, then let Gill do what he is doing, because he's the only man around who's handling it. Again, no answer. But anyway, the whole conversation of this kind came to an end when I demitted office. So the point that I'm trying to make is to go back again to from 67 to 92, I'll say from 92 to 2022, let's say another 30 years, is between Badal and Amrinder Singh, two parties, or 30 years almost, with the governor's rule thrown in. And where is Punjab today? If Gill was alive, we would again have to send him back there. That's the only tribute I can pay to him, because we look at 2015, Dinanagar, 2016, Pathankot, 2023, Amritpal, not to go into what's happening now. Drug mafia, terrorism, narco-terrorism. 1.5 lakh of our Punjab youth leave Punjab every year for foreign cities, countries, universities. Whether they go to study or not, I don't know. They get into trouble for not having all the papers. The roots of administration, roots of governance have not only been weakened, they have been cut. And we still don't have a policy for Punjab, because the center-state relations, as in a time of Blue Star or thereabouts and today, are not clear. Are we dealing with a state which is a border state with endemic problems, where agriculture is the only source and the boys have run away and gone away? There's no farm and labor. The water depth is going down. People are dying of fertilizer cancers. All kinds of problems are there at a very large scale. So who is concerned with those, and what exactly is our policy? So I would conclude by saying that whatever K.P.S. did in his 3 tenures in Punjab, there was no alternative. Call it good, call it bad, call it excellent, or curse him. He was the man on the ground, he was the man on the spot, and he shielded us. So with that, I would take your leave. Thank you.
Before I call on the next speaker present, I have a short statement here. You've heard of SS Virk. This was an officer who, from 84 to the end of terrorism and thereafter as well, continued to serve in Punjab. despite what Mr. Vora had mentioned just now, that many officers found it convenient to excuse themselves from the conflict and find safer havens in other deputations or on medical leaves or whatever else was the excuse. There are several other officers here who I will not mention who share that, shall we say, sense of responsibility, who served through virtually their entire career. At least one of them is on the stage here, and I will speak of him. Sardeep Singh Virk served from 1984 to the end of terrorism. He unfortunately was one of our speakers, could not come because he had to go in for an emergency eye procedure. He sent me a very short note. I will read it out. He says, "I am sorry for not being able to join all of you in remembering Sardar K.P.S. Gill due to medical problems affecting my eyesight. I have no doubt that Mr. Gill played the crucial role through his operational tactics and strategies which resulted in restoring normalcy in Punjab. While he worked in Punjab for 4 tenures, the most successful and effective period was when he worked as Director General of Police with Sardar Beyant Singh as the Chief Minister of Punjab. His strategy in all the tenures was to effectively confront the killer squads of the militants who ruled Punjab at that time. He planned strategies like the sector scheme, the Mand domination, night dominance, besides focusing on apprehending important militants and individually. Traveling extensively and meeting the police and the paramilitary teams working on anti-terrorist duties, he infused a new spirit in which Punjab soon not only recovered, but launched strong, the Punjab police, I'm very sorry, not only recovered, but launched strong offensives till the situation became normal. His strategies succeeded because he believed in them and led the forces from the front. He succeeded in achieving what most people at that time considered impossible. Unfortunately, after his departure, the peace which was ushered in could not be maintained, and soon gangsters and drug lords filled the vacuum caused by the defeat of militancy. The present scenario in the state is of indecision and ineffectiveness. I have no doubt that Mr. Gill's police strategies are more relevant today than ever before. I join all of you in remembering and paying tribute to Sardar K.P.S. Gill, the Super Cop. I would now like to invite our next speaker, Professor Bharat Karnad. He is one of the doyens of India's security and defense studies. He has served as a senior fellow in national security studies at the Center for is currently Professor Emeritus at the Center for Policy Research, Delhi. He is a former member of the National Security Advisory Board and of the Nuclear Doctrine Drafting Group of the Government of India. He has several books, the most recent of which is A Staggering Forward, Narendra Modi and India's Global Ambition. I would invite Professor Karnad to the podium. Thank you.
I feel a bit inadequate and almost an interloper among this collection of personages and perhaps an audience as well as on the stage who perhaps knew K.P.S. Gill far better, more intimately, professionally and otherwise than I. My relationship with Mr. Gill was, in a strange sort of way, formal, but not quite formal. It was on the cusp of formality and informality, but it lasted a long time because we had exchanges over time on disparate subjects. But the first time I was asked to meet him was by Khushwant Singh. I was then, just come back from California, had done my doctoral qualifiers, and then fell out with my dissertation advisor at UCLA. And so came back home and was doing much of nothing in Mumbai until Khushwant Singh, who was then the editor of Illustrated Weekly, asked me to write something, which he published. And lo and behold, a few years later, I think in 1979 or late 70s, he was appointed editor of Hindustan Times. And he somehow remembered me and said, would you like to be my assistant editor? By then I had gone back to California and I returned and said yes. It was 1983, I think, when Khushwant Singh said, do you know Mr. K.P.S. Gill? I was then the assistant editor, Hindustan Times. There was none of the, and because she ran a very loose ship, I expropriated the rules of foreign editor and military editor, whatever else I wanted to do. And he said, go meet Mr. Gill and help him write his autobiography. This is 1983 mine. In 1981 is when Shekhar Gupta tells me the insurgency began in Punjab, and K.P.S. Gill was coming to the fore in terms of tackling it. And I told Khushwant, really, it's not my thing to do shadow writing for anybody. He said, unse mil to lo. So I said, theek hai, mil lete hain. And I remember coming to his residence here in Lodi Road, one of the lanes right here. And I was met by the then Superintendent Police, Punjab Police, Mr. Sharma, who is here, who's ex-IG, Punjab Police, who was then in charge of his security, K.P.S.'s security. And I was escorted in, and K.P.S. got up from his chair and hovered over me, even as I quailed in my boots when he held my gaze. And the first thing he said was, I'm M.A. English Literature, Punjab University. I had nothing to say, so I said nothing. And we kept holding my hand for a while before I sort of shakily disengaged. And he sat down with his first glass of Black Label Johnny Walker. And we began talking. What he said has remained etched in acid in my mind simply because he explained just how he was tackling the Punjab problem. And because I knew nothing about the Punjab, because it's not my field, it was not my field. My PhD subject in UCLA was working on strategic arms limitation talks, Vladivostok 2, and so on and so forth, and stochastic models of arms racing and whatnot. And here I was being told and confronted by Punjab politics, which I had absolutely no interest or in an inkling about. And he told me, I don't know what it is that Khushwant told him about me, because I certainly was aware that he was trying to interest me in what he was doing in Punjab, which of course I was carefully listened to when he was making his pitch. Basically it was this, and it's fascinating. And by the way, my connection with Punjabiyat, such as it is that I'm married to one, a Delhi lass, whose connections, my mother-in-law was from Dera Ghazi Khan on the other side of Punjab. My father-in-law is from Moga, where he had some land which he had to sell during the height of the Khalistan insurgency. Whether he was coerced or compelled to sell, I don't quite know. But that is the extent of the personal knowledge I had of what was happening in Punjab. What K.P.S. Gill said was that he used the Jat Sikh psyche and turned it against the insurgents. And he explained how. He said that these well-motivated or highly motivated youngsters who was sort of, came in under the thrall of people like Bhindranwale and so on. He said that it was a reign of terror that they had sort of spread in most of Punjab, and they had mistreated people, solid stock of Jat Sikhs in the Punjab countryside, alienated them, mistreated their women, coerced and compelled them, and therefore had created a bedrock of ill will amongst a certain section of the Punjab kulak or landed peasantry. And this, he said, is what was my best weapon, because the very people that the insurgents had mistreated, whose menfolk had been killed, bloodily killed, the families humiliated, these were the people, he said, I went to them, and he said he didn't have to do much convincing in trying to recruit the youngsters from the families who were so, shall we say, mistreated by the insurgents, and told them, look, I will give you the license to hunt down the people who mistreated your parents or your sisters and aunts or whatever, who looted your property and so on, and I'll give you the license to hunt them down and join me. This was the core of what I imagine became the core of the Punjab Police Commando that he raised to tackle the insurgency. Apparently, he succeeded very well. Because if you recall, Khushwant wrote a column in the Hindustan Times called Malice Towards All. The one person, he had nothing but the highest praise, and he had malicious things to say about everybody in Delhi. And there was nobody he spared except K.P.S. Gill, whom he respected beyond the usual respect given a man of his stature. And because it is unusual for Khushwant, who really had no respect for anybody, which I hugely appreciated, he said basically that this is the only man I know who's entirely fearless. Entirely fearless. He says that he pulled me once to take me into the Golden Temple. This is Khushwant speaking. He sort of pulled me and took me along into the Golden Temple in Amritsar without a bodyguard, unarmed, and he in his police uniform. And he said Khushwant, who confessed he was no hero, was shaking, as he said, in his chappals, or rather barefoot, because he had gone into the temple complex. And he said this man was completely disregarded the Khalistanis who were ensconced in the temple premises. I could have shot him out of sight with a Lee Enfield 303s from wherever they were ensconced in. And he said, this is a man who inspires that kind of confidence and respect, which is what I instantly sort of sensed when I met him, that this was a man of great consequence. Anyway, this is what he said, that he used the Jat Sikh psyche against the insurgents by using the youth that they had violated, whose families they had mistreated, etc., and turned them into a very formidable force to deal with the insurgents, and they succeeded. And to back up what Ajay said, his greatest disappointment, this came later in the 1990s, when I was, K.C. Pant was the chair, 10th Finance Commission, and he got me in as the advisor defense expenditure because that was my field. And as I said, we had kept up a correspondence for very strange reasons that, that I still can't explain, except that whenever he came to Delhi, we'd meet up. And this was very episodic, nothing very regular. The thing was that, and as Finance Commission, we were housed in the tall building in Karnad Place, which has the Emporium on the ground floor. And I remember, I think many of people here are senior civil servants and DGPs, police and whatnot, and are used to the kind of Ji Huzuri sort of thing, and everybody bowing and scraping and so on. The curious thing was that I just got a sort of an idea of the sort of thing that is central to the Delhi culture, I suppose. When I was sitting in my Finance Commission offices and the PAB turns on and says, "Sir, it is DGPP, Punjab Police, who wants to speak to you." Now, he had gotten on the horn from Chandigarh, wherever he was, and called me up. And the next thing I knew was a kind of respect I got in a reflected sort of way of K.P.S. Gill's acquaintance, because thereafter, every time I came anywhere near the lifts, it was held open for me. I got salamed by people simply because they had heard, everybody had turned on their PABX when they knew that K.P.S. Gill wanted to speak to me. So we met then, and there was something we had discussed. And anyway, the point to make simply is that he's the sort of man that even in Delhi had left an imprint, obviously. And of course in Punjab, he had pretty much cleansed Punjab of the insurgents. But again, I'll end on the point that Ajay made in his introductory remarks. He was most disappointed and most passionately disappointed by the treatment meted out to the people he had selected and appointed to the Punjab Police cadre to hunt down and eliminate the terrorists, whom the Indian state, under pressure from do-gooder human rights organizations of various sorts, prompted, no doubt, by foreign agencies for their own reasons, had, led them into a situation where the Indian state had turned against them. And there were all kinds of commissions and committees for inquiries and God knows what not, that then pilloried and targeted these people, some of whom committed suicide, if I recall. And IG Sharma would bear me out. These are the people whom K.P.S. had invested his authority in for them to deal with the terrorists. And he thought this ingratitude of the Indian government and the Indian state was for him unbearable. And I shared with him this sense of loss, this sense of despair of the Indian government that he, I think, took to his end. It's a pity that the Indian government often works at cross purposes to the national interest. And this is how I remember K.P.S. Gill, and I will always do so. Thank you.
Among the officers who played some of the most critical roles in fighting insurgency or terrorism in Punjab were a group of youngsters who were literally taken out of the academy and thrown into some of the worst situations with little or no preparation. The IPS, you'll be surprised to know that the Indian Police Service Academy in Hyderabad had a capsule on counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency introduced only in 2009 on the insistence of the then Home Minister. So these were not people who were trained. They were young boys out of college undergoing a general law and order and counter-crime training, and who were thrown into a heavily armed movement with little or no idea of what to do. And I think it is a testament both to their courage and to K.P.S. Gill's leadership that they performed extraordinarily well. And Suresh Arora is one of those officers, an 82 batch officer who had his first posting in war-torn or insurgency-torn Punjab, served throughout the insurgency there. Eventually, of course, after the insurgency ended, rose in time to become Director General of Police. But his story is unique. His story is also unique in the sense that he was at the heart of the beginning of what you would say is Operation Black Thunder in the last phases of the insurgency. He has an unusual connection with SS Virk. I hope I am not trespassing on your territory, sir, but SS Virk was in fact one of the people. The other speaker who we are missing today is the man who got shot through the jaw just prior to the initiation of Operation Black Thunder. In fact, that it was that incident that triggered the police response, which eventually became what I would call the Gill Plan, which started well before any outside force or government or the center had intervened, and which continued till the Golden Temple was cleansed of all Khalistani presence. Mr. Aurora was the man who took him, and this is also again testament to the kind of facilities and services and pressures the police functioned under. He carried the wounded SS Virk on a commandeered scooter, if I am not wrong, sir, to the hospital. These are extraordinary times, extraordinary people who did enormous work which they were utterly unprepared for. I will now call upon Mr. Arora to make his presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sani. He has been very generous, in mentioning to me that we did very extraordinary at that time. The fact is that we were fortunate to have, Mr. Gill leadership at that time. And that is why we could deliver under his guidance and leadership. Today we all together to remember him as a man who provided the leadership to Punjab Police at a time when the Punjab state was going through a very difficult phase, facing a proxy war unleashed by our neighboring country. I joined Punjab Police in 1984 and first met Mr. Gill in the year 1985 when I was Assistant Superintendent of Police and he was Inspector General of Police. As Mr. Vora mentioned, that from being IGP AP at that time, he was touring and he visited Batala, which is a border town, and I was ASP there. So my first impression, I interacted with him with something, and after 2 days, he called back from Jalandhar and told me, Suresh, you mentioned that it is done. So that was the beginning of our professional relationship, which continued till the time he retired from service and even thereafter. Before joining IPS, I was working in corporate world as company secretary. Now there I had learnt the concept of leadership, which was just meant to maximize the profit for the company. We had never faced a situation where our men or our lives were at stake. But in uniformed services, the concept is entirely different, and more so in Punjab of that time. In fact, it has already been explained what was happening. Let me just share maybe one or two instances to take you back in those times what was happening. The morale of the police was so low, that some of the officers would interrogate terrorists by blindfolding them so that the officer's identity is not disclosed, lest their name comes on the hit list of the terrorists. We used to hear one extreme case where one DIG level officer would sleep after making a sentry, stand in the room whenever he would visit the field formation. That was what happening as far as low morale of the Punjab police was concerned. Every day, officers and men were being killed. They were desperately looking for a leader. Historically speaking, Punjab police has a great past. It consisted of brave officers, brave men. But maybe what was lacking at that time was a leadership who could lead them from the front, who could protect them from the bona fide actions if they make any mistakes. Around that time, in fact, officers from outside, Mr. Ribeiro, Mr. Gill, Mr. Virk, and others, they started joining Punjab police and tried to control the situation. In fact, such was the bad situation at that time. I remember in the year 1987, around 2nd or 3rd March, Kari Sari massacre took place. Terrorists just killed 38 innocent people, and 40 of them got injured as well. So that is what was happening. In fact, around that time, when Mr. Gill came on the scene, things started looking up. Now, if I look back, here an observation has been made by Mr. Vora that if Mr. Gill comes today, whether he would be able to control the same situation what he did at that time. Now, since I had worked as SSP in those times when he was a DGP, I have that experience also. And then also, since I have worked as DGP Punjab now for 3.5 years, so I know the rules of game have changed entirely now. Things are much more difficult at this point of time than it was there now when I look back. So, what Mr. Gill did, I would just sum up the state of affair which one of the constable told me in the meeting. He said, sir, अब क्या हो रहा है, he of course said in Punjabi, he said कि अब क्या हो रहा है कि एक उंगल मारने की कोशिश हो रही है. इससे उससे क्या होता है कि आप जब किसी को एक उंगल से मारते हो तो आपकी अपनी उंगल टूटती है. कहता है जब आप 5 उंगली इकट्ठी कर लो और फिर आप अपने एडवर्सरी को मारोगे तो आप उसका बड़ा तोड़ दोगे. Now he explained beautifully. That was what was happening. Some of the officers were fighting in Punjab police against terrorism. They were being identified and being targeted by the terrorists. So the mandate for Mr. Gill, I think, at that time was how to bring the entire police force, officers and men, to that level where everyone started working against terrorism. Now, if I identify certain factors, you might find a lot of in books, But what I would mention is that, he started with protecting his officers from if they commit any bona fide mistakes. He started, the concern for the safety and security of his men. The Punjab police was in shambles. We were not prepared for that kind of war. The terrorists had AK-47, we had nothing. So he ensured that we also get a good weaponry. He brought in the concept of bulletproof tractors. He brought in the concept of bulletproof mortars, sentry posts, bulletproof vehicles. He in fact established a workshop. He was so innovative. He established a workshop in our armed battalion. These things were being made for the men. And I will just give you one or two examples in the context of actually how he was taking decisions, maybe small decisions, but conveying very message to the force that he is around, that he is there for them. I was SSP Patiala. The government of Punjab passed a prohibitory orders for interstate movement of wheat. They said it is not to be allowed. Certain farmers, led by one honorable MP, decided to defy the ban. And he tried to cross over to Haryana with 25, 30 around farmers with trolleys carrying wheat. As instructed, SHO stopped them from crossing over, brought them to the police station. And in the evening, again, as per the instruction of the government, as a policy, they were asked to go. But Honorable MP insisted that they should be arrested first and be produced before the court. Now, those were not the part of the instructions. So finally, we had a situation at our hand where Honorable MP and couple of farmers sitting in the police station, police want them to leave and they are refusing to leave. So finally, SHO pitched the tent in the veranda of the police station, served up the langar, and they slept in the police station only. In the morning around 11 o'clock, my SHO called me up and said, "Sir, situation has been resolved." So I was quite surprised and asked for the details. He said, "Sir, one of his ASI told the Honorable MP and others to get ready as it has been decided to produce them in the court." So all of them got ready. There was a truck outside. They boarded the truck. And while being taken, ASI suggested to them, he said that since Magistrate Saab has not come to the office, is going to be late, so why not have langar in the Gurdwara Sahib, which is on the way only. So all of them agreed. So the moment they went into the Gurdwara Sahib, so our ASI fled from there, leaving behind everybody in the Gurdwara Sahib. Actually, the fact was, he tricked them into believing that they were arrested and being produced in the court of law, whereas that was not the case. So I really appreciated the presence of mind of my ASI, who very tactfully resolved the building up situation. So I promoted him to the next rank. As far as we were concerned, the matter was closed. After that, I was transferred to Chandigarh as SSP Chandigarh, where I received a summons from Breach of Privileges Committee to appear before the committee. What had happened was, Honorable MP had filed a complaint against the district officials for the breach of his privileges. So when I appeared before the committee, so one of the MP members asked me, "Well, Mr. SSP, your ASI could dare to tell a lie to an MP." So I told myself, thinking that my ASI told a lie because he wanted to tactfully handle the situation. So another MP member asked me, "Okay, well, Mr. SSP, what action had you taken against that ASI who told lie? I kept quiet. I didn't have the option to tell them that, okay, well, I appreciated and I rather promoted him. So one of the members said, oh, let's stop asking SSP. Call the then DGP, Mr. K.P.S. Gill, and the then Home Secretary. We'll ask them. So I came back, briefed Mr. Gill about the entire situation. Now, here comes that leadership quality. I had also been DGP. I also know when you get this kind of situations being created by your subordinates, you need to control your temper. But then Mr. Gill was different. He listened to me, he said, okay, well, Suresh, you don't worry, I'll take care. So when he appeared before the committee, he categorically told the members, he said, okay, well, if you expect me to take any action against my men, that's not going to happen. He told them that, do you know that his men and officers are dying every day in Punjab? And you expect me to take action against them? He said, yes, if you accept, I hereby tender my unconditional apology for whatever has happened. So all the members, started saying, oh, well, Mr. Gill is tendering an unconditional apology, so what more is required? So matter is closed. So he was sending a message, very clear back home that don't worry, I am there to look after you. Another way of showing his concern for his men. I was, in those days, we used to travel in bulletproof vehicles. So one situation was that I was not being allotted BP vehicle and there was unreasonable delay from the headquarters. So I went to him, told him the situation. He called his staff officer, Sushil. He said, Sushil, give that car, which came yesterday only for me, to Suresh. I still remember brand new bulletproof vehicle, done 800 kilometers, was given to me just like that. Now that was his concern for his men. Now when I look back, when I was SSP, I was not able to appreciate that what was happening. But now, being in the senior position, when I look back, I realize he was motivating us. He was protecting us. He was, putting that life in the force. And this must be happening in most of the districts, with most of the officers of that time. He was creating that confidence of ours in him. In fact, he gave us so much liberty that I remember once one DSP got posted who was not having a good reputation. So I just called him. I said, okay, sir, this DSP has been posted here. This is what he's known about. He said, what do you want? I said, I want him here. He said, okay, send him back. Now that was the authority he gave to the SSPs. It is not done overnight. In fact, I remember Hind Samachar group. So the family members here. Hind Samachar group publishes, Punjab Kesari in Hindi and Jagbani in Punjabi. They have seen the worst of the terrorism. Their family have suffered. They sacrificed 2 of their elder members. But despite that losses, they stood as a rock against terrorism. Now, in a desperate, bid, what terrorists started doing, they started killing their hawkers who were distributing newspapers. So much so that the distribution stopped in the district at that time in, I think, Bathinda and Amritsar, because the distribution vehicles were bombed on the way which were taking their papers. Now here comes Mr. Gill's vision. He came to Jalandhar. I was SSP Jalandhar at that time. He said the paper must publish. There is no question that the paper will stop. He wanted to send the message to the terrorists that it is Mr. Gill's writ which is running. not of the terrorists. So what he did, he ordered us to give, gunmen to all the hawkers who were distributing papers. He made police station as a collection point from where the hawkers will take, and every distribution vehicle was given an escort throughout the state. And that is how that situation was tackled by him. It was his vision, because he realized the importance of keeping this media at that time in operation. Once Mr. Gill visited along with his friend from Assam in Jalandhar. He told me, Suresh, he is my friend. Just listen to him. He has some issue to deal with in Jalandhar. I listened to him. I realized what he is telling me. The facts were as not per the law. So I told him, I said, okay, look, I'm sorry, it is not possible. It can't be done. He said, but your DGP, K.P.S, is my friend. He just told you. I said, I know my DG. He would never expect me to do anything wrong. He said, let's go to him. I said, sure. So we went to Mr. Gill, explained the facts, and I told him, okay, sir, this is what is what. He told his friend. He said, look, didn't I tell you? He will not do anything wrong. So let's go. He had given us that confidence where we could speak our mind to him. He would never hold it against us. He took the motivation level to that height. We started identifying ourselves with his personal conduct of working in the field. Like Mr. Jatinder Pannu, is a known media man. Once he saw him in Taran, in ongoing operation, firing LMG along with a constable. Now, this is what a DG was doing. And what we were supposed to do as youngsters. In fact, now I realize, it was part of the strategy. He was, as a strategy, they put youth versus youth. When we were put in the districts, we were the youngest. And when we came out, we were the oldest. Because every year, he was inducting new blood, new commanders, new young officers. So following his personal conduct, once I was coming from Chandigarh, in Nawashahar is a Banga town, so I got a wireless message that one terrorist have looted a bank, killing 2 of its employees, and while fleeing, they were intercepted by a police party, and in exchange of fire, 2 of our men and 2 of the terrorists have been killed. And 1 terrorist escaped to a nearby village and taken shelter there. Since I was near the spot only, so I decided to go to that village where the terrorist was holding up. In those days, most of us would carry a bulletproof jacket in our car. So the moment I reached there, my PSO started taking out BP jacket. When I looked around, my men were without any BP jacket. So I told him to keep inside. Now, I am emulating Mr. Gill, that what he would do. Now, he can't be seen in a BP jacket when his men are fighting without BP jackets. So I decided like that. I said, no. And this is where he took our motivation level, that we were willing to put our lives at stake for him, for the country. There are too many dimensions, I worked in for 10 years. It's not possible, to sum up in this much time. In fact, Operation Black Thunder, as was mentioned here, we all know it's in public domain. Most of the details are in public domain. But since I was SSP Amritsar, it started with us, so I could see, first-hand account of Mr. Gill's detailed planning and his vision for conducting that operation. Some of things may not be in the public domain. In fact, very few people know that it was a Black Thunder 2. There was earlier Black Thunder 1 also, when Mr. Virk was SSP Amritsar, and I happened to be his SP at that time. And maybe some other time I will share that how this Black Thunder name was given to Operation Black Thunder when the first Black Thunder was conducted. So lastly, it won't be fair if I say that it was only and only Mr. Gill who could achieve and restore the normalcy in Punjab. Definitely, the entire credit goes to him to the extent that he created an environment. He provided the market, that strategy. He led all other forces into as a team. Army. General Dower is here. In fact, when he was in Jalandhar, I was his, at that time, SSP, regular visitor to him. So we all know what Army did for us. In fact, the only Army can't speak about it. And as a strategy, it was part of outermost cordon which was provided. They will not come in direct contact with the public, but at the same time giving us a support. And that innermost cordon used to be of Punjab Police, and in between paramilitary forces. So the team which he built up, and at that time public, political class led by Sardar Byan Singh, Army, paramilitary forces, and the entire Punjab Police. They started working in one direction, and that's what Mr. Gill did, making them work in one direction, and that is how we could restore the normalcy in Punjab. So I will just end up with making one observation about the officers facing cases, and which was mentioned here. I said this thing to National Human Rights Commission. They were having some meeting, the full bench was there, and I said this thing at that time. I told them that I know what is law. I'm a law graduate. I told them that I'm a law graduate, I know what is law. I said, since 94 till now, how many years, Mr. Sani? 30 years? Terrorism came to an end from, let's say, 84 to 94. We normally give 94 is the period. From 94 till now, is there any allegation of any kind against Punjab Police? What has changed? It is the same force. It is the same law, same people. What has changed? So I asked them. I said, we helped in restoring the functioning of democratic institutions. But unfortunately, once restored, those very institutions came after us. To tell you the truth, sometimes, officer sitting says, yaar, wo wala time changa siga. We never expected, or we never thought. And I told Mr. Gill about this. I said, sir, your vision failed in this area. My officers are getting convicted even now. Last week only, life imprisonment to 80 years old. And what is the allegation? That one constable and one home guard, they disappeared, and that's the allegation. Now nobody asks, he was our man. So I conclude here. Thank you.
Mr. Shekhar Gupta is one of the most eminent journalists in the country. He is currently the co-founder and editor-in-chief of The Print. has a very, very exemplary career in the Indian Express, in India Today. He has been given a Padma Bhushan by the government. But the reason why he's here is that he is perhaps the single journalist who has the longest association with Mr. Gill. Right, he seems to have, if I may say, hounded Mr. Gill from Assam right down to the terminal stages of the counter-terrorism operations in Punjab. He knows him well. He is one of the people who has, excuse me, Abhini. That could have tempted people to stay a little longer, but but it's also appropriate that it comes when you are due to speak. So he's had a very long and very, I think, the closest relationship with Mr. Gill among journalists, and he's also the man who took the last interview, and many interviews before that, but he took the last interview with Mr. Gill, and that is for us a document of great value. Mr. Shekhar Gupta.
Well, thank you. I know everybody's been waiting, and a reminder has been served that I think the spiritual level of this gathering needs to be elevated a little bit. Like sugar levels, a spiritual level, so that will happen eventually. Now, I can make one claim in this audience, where I think most people have known Mr. Gill for multiple decades, that barring members of Mr. Gill's immediate family, most likely in this entire audience, I've known him the longest. Because Mr. Gill and I go back not to our times in Punjab, but we go back to our times in Assam. So I'd gone, in January of 1981, Indian Express sent me to the Northeast as its only correspondent in the entire region. Mr. Gill was just finishing his tenure as IG of, those days IG was the state police chief, IG of Meghalaya, where I was living in Shillong. And he was succeeded by another Sikh officer there, Mr. Babar. So I missed him there, but soon enough, because trouble was mostly in Assam, one day I got summons by the SP in Guwahati, Mr. Srivastav, who later joined SPG, I think, who said, "Ke Mr. Gill wants to meet you. Aap sham ko unke ghar aa jaiye." So I got there. Mr. Gill was an IG law and order. And he was quite controversial already because there was a very serious case against him. It was the death of an Assam agitator called Khargeshwar Talukdar, who had become one of the first martyrs of the Assam movement. And the allegation was that Mr. Gill kicked him in the belly, and that led to his kidney being ruptured, and he died. And it was very difficult for Mr. Gill to find justice in Assam at that point because so polarized was the situation. So he was not new to the situation that he faced in Punjab, except that in Punjab, the public opinion was mostly public opinion that mattered at that point, but people of his community. In Assam, he was still an outsider. So he had to get lawyers from outside. That's how I got to know Mr. K.P.S. Tulsi at his home, although I used to know him in Chandigarh earlier as a human rights activist. And as I came in, he sort of gave me the Gill stare, looking me up and down. I was 20, not yet 24. And he said, तुम तो मैंने सुना है मोटरसाइकिल भी घूमते हैं सारे में. And jokingly, he asked his SPs का कभी चलान कराया कि नहीं, license check किया कि नहीं, like that. It became an equation. We met several times. And we can all write books about our experiences with Mr. Gill. I will just tell you one in the case of Assam. The day after Nellie massacre, it just so happened, reporter's luck, I ended up breaking the story of the Nellie massacre. 2 days later, not 1 day, 2 days later, Mrs. Gandhi came to Nellie because so many Muslims had got killed. So she came in, and this was at the helipad, and Sanjay Hazarika, who was then a stringer for the New York Times, because foreign correspondents could not travel to the Northeast, they sent their local reporters, Indian natives. So he was there, and he asked Mr. Gill a question, and Mr. Gill said, "Isko thero, isko rehne do, baad mein baat kar lenge, we'll talk about this later," because it was a very fraught environment. Mrs. Gandhi was furious. because she was, never imagined I see her from this close, nearly screaming in exasperation. 3,500 Musliman mar gaya. Iska jawab kaun dega? Iska jawab kaun dega? And this she was saying to Mr. Gill and to Mr. R.V. Subramaniam, who was then the advisor to the governor and pretty much running the state. So in that situation, Sanjay Hazarika said, I will quote you. I work for the New York Times. I will quote you and say that when asked this question, the IG of police gave this peevish answer or something like that. So Mr. Gill said, oh, the New York Times. I thought you were from the State Department. Now it's okay. So you can go and say what you want to say about me, but spell my name right. And he held up his name badge saying, spell my name right. So that was my first experience of seeing Mr. Gill in action. And then we saw a lot more after that. And I will tell you one more, and then I will go into today's situation. The other was just after Operation Blue Star. After Operation Blue Star, he had sort of been banished to Jammu. I think IGBSF was he? IGBSF. That wasn't a job that he wanted, but they didn't want him in Punjab at that point. So he was banished there. He was banished, and I think we met someplace, I'm trying to recall, in Delhi or someplace. And he said, वहाँ मैंने देखे आर्मी वाले, एक ब्रिगेडियर साहब की वहाँ फ्रैक्चर थी. तो मैंने कहा कैसे हो गया? कहता है मैं गोल्फ खेलता हुआ गिर गया. तो मैंने कहा आप गोल्फ खेलते हुए नहीं गिरे, आप रामगढ़ में थे और वहाँ पे म्यूटनी हुई तो आपके जवानों ने आपको पीट दिया. बात सबको पता है. सो इसे मैंने उनको कहा कि देखो आपने आर्मी क्यों भेजी और आर्मी का नाम क्यों लिया ब्लू स्टार में? आप भेजते आर्मी को, भेजना ही था, नाम तो पुलिस का ले देते, क्योंकि पुलिस को तो बदनाम होना ही है. आपने फौज को क्यों बदनाम कराया? एंड ही सेड, मैंने बोला कि देखो नेहरू और पटेल बेवकूफ़ थे कि उन्होंने हैदराबाद में पुलिस एक्शन बोला. भेजी तो आर्मी थी, पर उन्होंने आर्मी एक्शन नहीं बोला, उसको पुलिस एक्शन बोला. वाई? बिकॉज पुलिस कैन ऑलवेज बी ब्लेम्ड. नाउ द रीज़न आई एम starting with this story is because tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of Rajiv Gandhi being sworn in as Prime Minister of India. It will be 40 years tomorrow, 31st December 1984 he was sworn in. That's how time flies. So among the thoughts that came out, and I know that fine minds like Mr. Gill, Ian Ram Mohan, also from IPS, also Assam cadre, and they had an equation. In fact, he was DIG Darang during this period, 1981-82. The killings and massacres, the first massacres took place on the North Bank under his watch. They sat down and this new thought developed that, look, these terrorist situations will arise. When they arise, the police can't handle them, because if they get holed up in some place, the police can't handle them. You will need some army-like organization. But it is not a good idea to expose the army to this. So let's find something else. And that's how the idea of NSG came in. And in a small office in R.K. Puram, Mr. Ian Ram Mohan, there was a Major General with him, I forget the name, and there was one more officer. Those three would sit there, and we young reporters would hang out there just because we were so fascinated. These people were getting copies of all the great journals on terrorism and other international publications, and they were reading up. And there was access, and there was discussion, and we know how the thought evolved that the model that India will follow for setting up the NSG will be the German GSG 9, Grenzschutzgruppe 9, which had fought against Baader-Meinhof gang, etc. So a very specialized counter-terror force, and it's sort of a kind of justice that soon enough it came to be tested in Operation Black Thunder. Because when that happened, the army was kept out. Most people who were firing were drawn from the army. Special Action Group was all drawn from the army. The officers were all from the army. But they came in NSG uniform, they did whatever they did, and they went back to the anonymity of the army. So there was nobody targeted. People who participated in Operation Blue Star are still on the hit list. They still have to take precautions. It was a very difficult situation. And I saw the other side of this, the other side of the mutinies, for example. So a lot of Sikh soldiers mutinied. They were put to court-martial. Those days, I don't know whether it was honor among thieves or whether it was that, the state took journalists seriously enough, or maybe those were innocent times that the army permitted me to go and watch the court-martial proceedings of these Sikh mutineers at Jabalpur, the only time I've been to Jabalpur. So these proceedings were going on, and I saw in the court-martial one Sikh soldier after the other. They were simple people. They had the same story. मैं सुनिया सी कि मेरा गुरुद्वारा ढाता पूरा मर्द सारे मारते या खसी करते पंजाब दे दे बीन स्टेरिलाइज्ड जनानियां नूं ते बच्चियां नूं चुक के लै गए हैं बच्चियां दा हिंदू बनाया जा रहा है ते वगैरह 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 सो देन बड़ी सेड लेकिन आपने चेक कौन बताता किसने बताया ग्रंथी ने बताया ग्रंथी को किसने बताया किसी और ग्रंथी ने बताया There were no mobile phones, even trunk calls were very difficult those days, and we forget that when Operation Blue Star was carried out, all of Punjab was put under complete communication blackout. It was impossible to get a call out. I know that, I was in Amritsar, I was trying to reach my family to say that I'm here, I'm all right. It was impossible to get a call out. In that situation, see what happened. So his point was that because of this, the army suffered as an institution. And these situations will arise. India should have something so these situations do not arise. So if you look at Rajiv Gandhi's time as well, he's criticized for many things he did. But there are two things. He did some very important things for national security, but two contributions that nobody gives him credit for. One, setting up the NSG, and second, setting up the SPG. Because after the assassination of his mother, they figured that it wasn't good enough to leave the security of India's top VVIPs to Delhi police, even though Mrs. Gandhi's security was under the charge of her own cousin, Gautam Kaul, who unfortunately passed away not long ago, a couple of months ago. So these were the thoughts, and these were creative minds that worked in these situations. And we have to be eternally grateful because the army itself as an institution will now almost be never called out directly to participate in any counter-terror operation because there is a cover. And under that cover, you can put 20 other things because you don't need tanks for these operations. You don't need fighter planes for these operations. You just need well-trained people with wherewithal to reach where they need to reach. So that's one. Now I'll switch periods and I will think aloud for a few minutes on what Mr. Gill, if he came back today, what is it that he will see in Punjab? He will see a lot that's broken. He will see broken politics. He will see a return of religiosity. He will see a complete loss of credibility by the state government, by the state civil services, by the clergy, by Sikh politicians, and a complete breakdown of trust between, I won't say all of Punjab and the center, but the Sikh population of Punjab and the center. People say, oh, Muslims don't vote for the BJP. I will tell you that in no community in India, let me not say dislikes, let me say disagrees with this BJP more than the Sikh community. You just have to go anywhere in Punjab and raise a question. Last elections, I mostly missed out the action. When I travel during elections, I write a series called Writings on the Wall, just by looking at literally what's written on the walls. So I thought towards the close of the last phase, at least I will spend some time in the states I know well. So let me try and pick up some reference points. So I did a short travel through the 5 or 6 border districts of Punjab. A lot of what you hear is actually much more widespread than what it would have been 40 years back. But a lot of it is the same. That Sikhan naal dhakka ho reha hai, Punjab naal dhakka ho reha hai, Delhi sadi gal nahi sunda. In Punjab, there is a strong anti-Delhi view. You like it or not, but it's there. It's a part of life. It's much more than it might have been in Tamil Nadu at any point of time. In Punjab, particularly with the Sikh community, it's very, very strong. The second thing is, I will not go into too much detail, but just since it's writings on the wall, see the promises. Everybody knows that at least two radicals won in this election. Mand lost, but the other two won. Byan Singh's son and what's his name? Amritpal Singh. See their manifestos. And those manifestos are written on the wall in Gurmukhi. One of the elements in the manifestos always is to fight against drug menace, right? That means the state has completely failed at this. And it's a double whammy because the state has failed to curb the drug menace. At the same time, narcotic trade is funding and powering the extreme forces. So you are hit from both sides. The second thing they talk about is, again, you have to get, once you get under it, you know what it is. It's a much bigger story. कि नौजवानों दा पलायन रोकया जाएगा. That is, the flight of the youth has to be stopped. Now, what is the issue here? The issue here is that family after family in villages of Punjab, particularly in border districts, now old parents are by themselves because the kids have gone to Canada, America, someplace, so they're still hanging out as illegals in some place, parts of Europe, Georgia, Kosovo, right? So on and so forth. And the families are lonely. Families are lonely and they are worried. कि जी मुंडे तो चले गए, उन ज़मीन कौन संभालेगा? So the fact that the young are going away is actually an issue in Punjab. So I would have thought, and that's why it was important for me to travel, I would have thought that everybody would vote for somebody who will say, I will get you easier visas to Canada. In this place, a vote is being sought and being given for stopping immigration, right? Nobody had imagined, I had not imagined I will see that situation in Punjab. Now, there is a lot of realities underneath this. One of the realities is, what are the kind of jobs Punjabis are going overseas for? They are not going to do any value-added jobs. I tell my Sikh friends, that you become so arrogant and in some ways so comfy and so smug because you have people you call as bhaiyas coming and working your fields. They are working your fields. Your boys have motorcycles, in some cases cars, always tractors. They have some money in their pocket. Bhukha koi nahi marda. Nobody is starving. The ego is othe, right? Knowledge level is ethe, right? So, and they have nothing to do all day. They are sitting because bhaiyas are running your kheti. What do they do then? Their only ambition in life कि कोई तरीके नाल IELTS पास, जिसको IELTS बोलते हैं, IELTS पास हो जाए. IELTS पास हो जाए तो फिर हम कनाडा जाइए. तो कनाडा जाके तुसी की करोगे? You will do exactly for the Canadians what bhaiyas do for you. So you will become the bhaiyas of Canada. Now, say about 5 years back, people would not be happy to hear this. Now I find that grown-up people, particularly those who are parents, nodding in affirmation, and they say, हाँ जी ज़रूर रुकना चाहिए है, बिल्कुल गलत है. Then you look at the data. If you look at the data of remittances by Indians from overseas, you would have thought Punjab will be high up there. Punjab is not even, you can say, okay, it's behind Gujarat, all right. You can say, okay, it's behind maybe Maharashtra, all right. Okay, behind Andhra, Telangana, because Telugu bahut gaye, all right. Punjab is at number 14. The percentage of remittances sent back by Punjabis from overseas is not even 1% of all of the remittances received by India. Why? There are multiple reasons. One is that these are not people doing really value-added jobs, so they don't produce that much surplus. They are not software engineers. They're not setting up startups, right? They are not the stars of those businesses as many were 40 years ago, right? But as even in Yuba Valley, they were the biggest peach farmers, for example. That generation went in 1920s. Now these are very working class people. A lot of them are working in gurdwaras because they're taken like that, right? Because my kirtan needs 20 tabalchis, right? That's how the visas are given. Then you go and find some wherewithal for yourself. So you can see this there. In fact, floating through Punjab, while I saw all this IELTS everywhere, a young reporter with us who came from Punjab University, he said, "Sir, मैं आपको एक लिंक भेजता हूँ. एक फिल्म है, उसका नाम है जट वर्सेस IELTS." So वो Amazon के ऊपर फिल्म है, आप उसको देखिए, आपको पंजाब की खबर पता लग जाएगी क्या हो रहा है. That is the story of a young man. The exact description. ट्रैक्टर है, मोटरसाइकिल है, जेब में पैसे हैं, दारू पीता है, लेकिन अंग्रेज़ी नहीं आती है, बिकॉज अकाली इसने पंजाबी मीडियम कर दिया था पंजाब में, राइट? अंग्रेज़ी बिल्कुल नहीं आती है, तो आईलेट्स में जाता है. जो आईलेट्स की अंग्रेज़ी है वो क्लास 8 के भी नीचे की अंग्रेज़ी है. इनफैक्ट a lot of the teachers from Delhi schools in summer time go to Punjab and teach these IELTS because it's additional income. So he's flunking again and again. And finally, the family says, all right, you can't pass IELTS and go to Canada, so we'll find you a girl who has cracked IELTS and who has a Canadian visa. And so the visa is your dowry. So हो जाता है, शादी हो जाती है. शादी हो जाती है, then on the Suhag Raat, this guy is not interested in checking out the bride. He's checking out her passport. And he looks at her passport, visa. And I think Suhag Raat ends there, right? Then the film shifts to Canada, and you see this woman now in a Western dress, in a bar, having a drink with somebody because she's now dumped this guy, right? So phas gaya. Now what does he do? And then the girlfriend who he had dumped because he had found this one with IELTS and visa, she clears her IELTS and she gets her Canadian visa. And she says, all right, I forgive you, I'll take you to Canada. So the whole thing is about somehow reaching Canada for the lowliest of jobs. That's not how Punjabis were brought up to think. That is not good for the Punjabi self-esteem. So look at this state. Again, underneath this is a story of the decline of Punjab. Until 2000, Punjab was number 1 in India by way of per capita income. Today, it's number 13. And the way things are going, in the next 3 years, it will be number 14. And ask me which state will leave Punjab behind at number 13. It will be West Bengal, right? So that is the reality of Punjab. Agriculture has got tired. No industry can come in. You people know who heads the Punjab Industrial Promotion Board or something, right? Check out what's happening to his factories. His factories are all being shifted to Madhya Pradesh because there is no environment in Punjab where you can run a factory, because any 10 people bring tractors and trolleys and say, "Tusi sada pani kharab karta, tusi sade bande nahi bharti kitte, tusi baro bande le aaye ho." So factory after factory is shutting down. No jobs are being created. Canada is now shutting down, right? Canada is shutting down. America will shut down. So Punjab is now looking at multiple problems. It's in this situation that you have a government, state government, which has no ideology, right? The problem with Aam Aadmi Party is it's a party with no ideology, right? In Punjab, how can you have a government which is all about "main tenu eh de deanga, main tenu eh de deanga," right? Free bijli, free this. Again, not good for Punjabi self-esteem. Self-esteem chhod do, Punjab mein to ego hoti hai, right? Punjab mein you have to say, "Tusi mainu eh dena hai, tusi mainu eh dena," not ki "main tenu eh dena hai, main tenu eh dena hai." So you have a government like that, a giveaway government. The Akali Dal, which for better or worse spoke for the Sikh community and sort of controlled Sikh politics. Akali Dal is dead in the water. It's not all somebody else's fault. It's also the Badal family's fault. But the fact is, Akali Dal being in this state means that Sikh religiosity now has no outlet. Earlier, Mr. Badal, one Badal or the other, I know General Jacob used to call them Cloud Senior and Cloud Junior, right? They were there, somebody could talk with them. There were other people. There were Gurcharan Singh Tora, Jagdev Singh Talwandi. These were Harchand Singh Longowal. These were people known nationally and in a way respected nationally. Now there is nobody, I think even in this place, barring some of the older people from Punjab, if I ask you who's the head of SGPC, nobody would know. But SGPC controls the key gurdwaras of the Sikhs. The politics of Sikhism has gone back to the Gurdwaras. It's gone back to a faceless clergy now, with no Akali Dal as the interface. So you see this Tankhaya designation of the Akali leaders, etc. All of this is very significant, because what happens if the premier Sikh party is completely deprived of its credibility, that they can't speak. By the way, they haven't yet resigned yet, so I don't know how that order is working. But if they lose credibility, then who speaks for the Sikhs? And that's where Amritpal Singh, he'll finish his 2 years under NSA, he'll be back, right? He'll be back, and he will be like Bhindranwale. He's gone a step ahead of Bhindranwale. At least he says Khalistan. Bhindranwale never said Khalistan. He said, "मैं खालिस्तान नहीं मांगता, पर जब कोई मैंने दे देगा, तो मैं नाम भी नहीं करता," right? He was like that, but now maybe it will go one step further. But this, not just alienation, but the alienation, the loss of self-esteem, the loss of, it's a bale culture, chardi kala, that all of India looks up to the Sikhs, right? I mean, if Sikhs are ascendant, all of India is ascendant. That is not the feeling that you have in Punjab right now, because the Sikhs are not rising anywhere in India. Sikhs are leaving by the plane load for Canada. The problems that arise today, I told you about the political issues. At the popular level among the Sikhs again, there is a feeling that this is a Hindu government. In any case, there is suspicion of Delhi. No, this is a Hindu government. They see us as another sect of Hinduism. Now, that's a very sensitive issue in Punjab among the Sikhs. Even in early 80s, people had started saying, particularly the BJP then, that, oh, who are the Sikhs? Wo to Hindu hi hain. So there was a time with Bala Sahab Devras, who was an RSS chief. He said, "Ye Sikhon aur Hinduon mein kaise problem ho sakti hai?" Because one of the demands of the Akalis was that Sikhs should be declared a separate faith, because in the constitution, they are like Buddhists, Jains, they are sort of extended part of the members of the Hindu family. So, कि अलग होना चाहिए. In fact, one of the morchas came up with this as the main demand. So, Bala Sahab Devras said कि Sikh और Hindu अलग कैसे हो सकते हैं? Sikh कौन है? Sikh तो केशधारी Hindu हैं. So, we were in Bhindranwale's darbar that very day, and Bhindranwale said, "Eh, जोड़ा निक्कर वालियां दा सरदार है, वो कहंदा जी Sikh कौन है? Sikh ते केशधारी Hindu हैं." भाई मैनू गल दस, जे Sikh केशधारी Hindu होए ते मुसलमान की होणगे सुन्नतधारी Hindu, right? So, there is a great, I mean, nobody hates the Hindus just like that, right? I mean, it's a very easy relationship. But if you go on underlining this all the time, that we are the same, it does not amuse people there. So that's the other issue. And then, finally, this is the era of social media. This is the era of social media. You can hide nothing. Nobody can hide anything right now. Americans could not hide Abu Ghraib 20 years ago, right? How can you hide anything now? Plus, these people know how to use the power of the social media. You go to small town families, villages in Punjab, see what they listen to in the mornings. When people get up, when women are working in the kitchen, they are listening to this bhajan, kirtan, and pravachans, discourses, all from these stations, YouTube stations in Canada and places, all talking radicalism. If not separatism, but radicalism. That is now a fact. In that which is brew, then you throw in the fear of conversions, the Christian activism, then the Deras, and you are dealing with return of the old suspicions raised to the power many times over, also now fueled by social media and the new and easy access to all kinds of mass media. That's why if Mr. Gill came back today and looked at Punjab, he'll be very worried, but I think he will also figure that the methods that could be used in the past cannot be used anymore, because there are no leaders on that side. The local politics is broken, because then whatever else, you always had an Akali to fall back on. And that's the reason I think that one of the biggest errors that has taken place politically under the watch of this government. I mean, if you support the BJP, you blame the Akalis for it. I think, however, that the larger party has the greater responsibility to keep these things together. This alliance should never have been allowed to break. And this idea that BJP will now grow into Punjab, and because all the Hindus will vote for them, enough Sikhs will vote for them, and they could rule Punjab. I think it's you can try anything in life. In politics, everybody has all the options. But it's not as if only you can read through this. There are lots of people in Punjab also who are reading through this, and they are not happy about this. And it's a very dangerous game. Punjab, you can't put Punjab out of sight, out of mind like Manipur. And not just because it's so close, because Punjabis are everywhere. They are everywhere. Manipuris are not everywhere in your system. Punjabis, the Sikhs are everywhere in your system. And that's the reason I think everybody has to step back. If Mr. Gill came back, he will tell this government also, step back. Don't confront. Don't fight. Just listen to what anybody is saying. Listen to facts on the ground. Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee has not held an election since 2011. It's been 13 years. Why? Because they are not able to revise their electoral rolls. Every 3 months, they take an extension by 3 months. Why? Because the number of qualified voters now is about 40% of what it was in 2011. Why? Because Sikhs are changing. Young Sikhs are changing. They can't all follow the same, or they can't keep to all the demands of the doctrine. And if they have to put a picture in their electoral rolls, full facial picture with for women in particular, eyebrow hair not plucked, upper lip hair, it's a problem. I do remember that Bhindra Wale always used to say, he would tell me also, oh, kithe gay ji Tableen Singh Sikhni jedi paw putdi hai. Sikh woman who plucks her eyebrows, right? So you see a big change in the Sikh faith. You see at the same time a swing back to the doctrinaire understanding of the faith. At the same time, the party that spoke for the faith has disappeared. Party that's in power, I don't know what that stands for. In that situation, one thing Punjab is not ready for is for the BJP to go and fill this vacuum. And that's where the center also needs allies. Now, I will conclude this with just one conversation. When this alliance had come up between the Akali Dal and the BJP, shortly after the alliance, Akalis were in power in Punjab, Akali BJP, these Bhindra Wale posters, etc., started appearing in the Golden Temple. So we were writing very angry stuff in the Express. So I got invited by Mr. Vajpayee. This is what got reported at that time because it was on the record. And he said, क्यों आप इतना नाराज हो रहे हैं? तो मैंने कहा आप रोकते क्यों नहीं इनको? He said, मैं कैसे रोकूं? I said, आप withdraw कर लो support. तो इसे देखिए पंजाब में समस्या क्या थी? पंजाब में समस्या ये थी कि हिंदू और सिख दोनों एक दूसरे के गले पड़ गए थे. उसको कैसे ठीक करें? अगर मेन सिख पार्टी और मेन हिंदू पार्टी दोनों साथ आ जाएं अलायंस में तो प्रॉब्लम खत्म हो गई कि नहीं? तो मैंने कहा लेकिन हर साले भिंडरा वाले को लगाएंगे. सो ही सेड खुराना जी किस लिए बैठे हैं? तो ही had called Madan Lal Khurana also to that breakfast, that he was managing, he was doing this conflict resolution. So I think this alienation now in many ways is much more dangerous than what had happened in the past. And time to address it is now, and the way it's being addressed is not the way to do it.
Thank you, Shekhar. I'm going to test your patience for a few minutes, speaking about an aspect of Mr. Gill that is relatively less known, in order to sort of give you the endurance to suffer me. I have also asked them to start serving, I shall call them snacks, while I speak. very few people. It's a very interesting contradiction that reams and reams of stuff has been written about K.P.S. Gill, and especially in the new WhatsApp age and the social media age. You have gigabytes of material on K.P.S. Gill, but very little of what he actually was is known. And most of what is written about him sort of falls into either hagiography or hate. And all of it is based on very little information. One of the things that K.P.S. Gill can be accused of is tremendous learning and a capacity to write which is rare even among people whose profession it is to write. And I'd like to draw your attention. There is a table outside with at least 2 of his books. One is a compilation of his shorter writings, and one is the Nights of Falsehood, which is a documentation of what the Akalis and the SBGC did, the debasement of the faith and its culmination of, and then the culmination of this debasement in the extremism and terrorism that afflicted the state for almost a decade and a half. Anna Simmons, who's a professor at the defense analysis at the US Naval Postgraduate School, talking about his personality and its influence, wrote, and I quote, "One lesson that could be distilled from Gill's example is that it takes intimate familiarity with what insurgents are peddling to undo them. But this leaves 2 other points about his background unexplored. First, he was not just steeped in knowledge about the Sikh faith. He knew a lot about other religions as well, and he had a passion for poetry. Together, these avocations would have given him ways to express himself that he would not have acquired simply by studying his opponents alone. Second, he knew the police. He understood what made the rank and file and their leaders tick, and how they could be challenged to operate more effectively. In sum, Gill could not only plug into the psyches of all the key players in the Khalistan drama, to include journalists, politicians, community leaders, but he had a well-developed feeling for how to appeal and or outwit them all equally well, and he relished doing so. That's really, I think, emphasizes the intellectual content that is often lost when we focus only on the strategic and tactical in Punjab. I'm going to read out a few brief pieces so that you can get a sense of the kind of writings he brought in. One of the things he's emphasized was how little the Khalistanis knew about Sikhism. He says, while speaking to many arrested terrorists in Punjab, and I'm quoting him, I found that though the Khalistani ideology was supposed to be based on the 6 scriptures, their knowledge of these scriptures was uniformly rudimentary and in some cases non-existent. Some of the terrorist leaders could not even recite a single stanza from the Granth Sahib and were ignorant of the basic tenets of Sikhism. And yet, the intensity of the conviction with which they sought to inflict their belief systems and their codes of conduct on others through extreme violence was difficult to imagine. The essence of bigotry is not, as its proponents and apologists often project, a core of fundamental religious beliefs and practices. It is, in fact, the construction of a hated other. Pindranwale attributed all the supposed suffering of the Sikh community to the evil Brahmins who ruled from Delhi, and ascribed to the Hindus at large both a power and a malignancy that were entirely of his own imagining. This was combined with extreme doctrinal simplification of selective passages derived from the Sikh scriptures and history to justify violence against the hated other. I would also add that very few Indian writers have actually written quite as eloquently and with as great an understanding about democracy. And I quote one of the passages from his Nights of Falsehood. Democracy and liberalism are not a sufficient defense, and this is a fact that the ideologues of freedom need equally to comprehend. There is a fatal flaw in the liberal mind. Having established in structure and form, though seldom in substance, a system of governance that corresponds to its conception of democracy, it feels that nothing more needs to be done. The truths of the liberal ideology are, as the American Declaration of the Rights of Man expresses it, self-evident. They require no proof, no reiteration, and no defense, certainly no defense by force of arms. once democracy, or even the ritual of quinquennial elections is established according to liberal mythology, the mystical, invisible hand keeps everything in place. The superior wisdom of the masses ensures order and justice. This is just so much rubbish. As we should know after living with falsehoods for 50 years now, truth does not triumph unless it has champions to propound it, unless it has armies to defend it. In a later article titled India's Flawed Democracy, he writes, "The difficulty is that democracy in India hasn't mistakenly been identified exclusively with the electoral process. The truth is, without effective constitutional governance across the length and breadth of the country, and without the iron rule of law, democracy is at best a legitimizing charade for transient kleptocracies. Such regimes secure public support through the entire range of stratagems, legal and illegal, available to ideologically bankrupt political formations, including violence, intimidation, bribery, unprincipled alliances, the cult of personality, vicious communal and caste mobilization, and illegal and unconstitutional arrangements with violent, often anti-national political actors and forces. And as they succeed, they participate in and actively engineer continuous processes of institutional decay in the structures of democratic governance in the country." I think you will find resonances of this even today, though this was written almost 20 years earlier. He also spoke of the nature of administration in this country. And I hope I'm not taking too long, but I assume you are also otherwise occupied. So ignore me if you are so tempted. They are often harsh, exacting. He spoke of the nature of administration. They are often harsh, exacting, demanding a strength of character and dedication that is increasingly rare among those who cling to the reins of power in India. Governance demands a little bit of steel in the soul. In the midst of the disturbing consciousness of all the mounting violence, the cacophony of 1,000 bits of information, the dissonance of desires and duties, the administrator must create a small area of stillness, of silence, and in this make calm and calculated judgments. In this hushed mental arena, again, he must prepare himself to face the consequences of his failures of judgment. Those who cannot create this space, those who lack the steel, should seek to relocate themselves. You need this kind of strength of character, and this is lacking increasingly in the people who control power in this country. I will not take very much more time, but I want to get to one of the aspects that has been spoken of, human rights and the human rights organizations. And he wrote, "Virtually every terrorist group in this country has set up front organizations on the human rights platform, both within India and through affiliates abroad. The function of these front organizations is to obstruct the security forces, to create confusion in the minds of the people, to abuse the processes of democracy in order to weaken democracy, to exploit every loophole in the laws that allows the terrorists to secure their ends, and to generate propaganda and pressure at international fora in favor of their objectives. We can no longer afford to ignore the weaponization of human rights processes and institutions by terrorists and their front organizations in their war against the state, society, and civilization. This is a deep and insidious strategy that has capacities to paralyze our responses, even as the terrorists consolidate their spheres of influence and activity." I would like to repeat a claim that K.P.S. Gill often made, that the counterterrorism campaign in Punjab was one of the most humane in the world. When we look around ourselves today, look at Gaza, look at Afghanistan, look at Iraq, look at Libya, look at all these theaters in West Asia. Look at Pakistan. Look at the Western counterterrorism campaigns that have been launched over there, and the Pakistani campaign against its own people. Wide areas are bombed out of existence. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in Afghanistan, more than 400,000 fatalities in Iraq. The Gaza Strip with a tiny population, has already scored up 45,000 fatalities, 2/3 of them civilians. 21,000 people lost their lives in Punjab over a decade and a half. 21,000 people, of whom 8,000 were police personnel and 12,000 were terrorists. Despite this, we find this tremendous, tremendous campaign that has been launched, particularly against K.P.S. Gill and the officers who were closely associated with him. And you could ask yourself a simple question: why do they hate him so much? If you look at the data, you find that in each phase, before and after a K.P.S. Gill tenure, violence was always higher than it was when K.P.S. Gill was in charge as Director General of Police. In 10 months, when he was extracted from the Punjab at one of the worst times, at a time where he believed that it would take another few months to resolve the problem of Punjab, in 1990, in 10 months, under another Director General of Police, I will not mention his name, it is not the intention to denigrate anyone over here, nearly 4.5, almost 5,000 people were killed in 10 months, the highest fatality incidents in the entire trajectory of terrorism in Punjab. Apart from those who have served in Punjab, and perhaps the Gill family, and Shekhar, of course, I don't think there will be half a dozen people in this room who can name that Director General of Police who presided. Exactly, I said half a dozen. Now, you have to ask yourself, and in Khalistani literature, which is flooding the social media, there is not a single mention of that gentleman, despite the fact that he presided over the largest number of killings. So why do they hate K.P.S. Gill? The answer is simple. He is the man who defeated them. And it also tells you why and how closely associated the human rights lobbies are with the extremist lobby, because they also do not mention anyone else. They also only mention K.P.S. Gill, and they mention the officers who were associated with him. I would like you to think about these things. I would also like you to consider, among those in this age of social media and short messages, those of you who still like to read something of depth, to perhaps pick up a couple of copies of Mr. Gill's book, or books rather, which are available outside. Thank you so much. Thank you to the speakers. Very kind of you to have taken the time in this very cold weather at the peak of the holiday season, when nobody wants to be part of these things. And thank you also to the entire audience who have listened to, I think, very, very good presentations, as well as my droning on. Thank you very much for the evening. Also, I think we are going to mill around now. I'll ask them to take out the extra chairs, and you will all be served where you are. Please, sir.